educational modules, and you're going to hear a number of these as time goes on here because several of us are doing these. These are required for, I believe, for Advanced Leader Bronze and Advanced Communicator Silver. This particular one is called Beginning Your Speech, and what it's about is speech introductions. Introductions to speeches are kind of a puzzling thing for lots of people, and I'm not really sure why that is. You all remember being in school and in your writing classes, English classes, being told, you know, to write an introduction to every speech. And you were always told there are several things you should do, you know, ask a provocative question or make a startling statement or whatever. What most English teachers never did, though, is explain why introductions are important. And it really doesn't have anything to do with writing or speaking. It has to do with the psychology of the audience. The point of an introduction is to create what psychologists call a set. The set is the state of mind of receptivity. In other words, you want the audience ready to hear whatever it is you're going to tell them. So if you stand up and just start talking about something, it takes people a while to figure out why you're telling them that and what they should do with the information. But if their mind is in a place where they're waiting for whatever it is you're going to say, they're going to understand you right from word number one, and they're going to like what you say much better. According to our friends at Toastmaster here, that's what I've just talked about. The three purposes of an introduction is to get the attention of the audience, to introduce the topic, and to establish rapport. But those are actually internal things to the audience and not really external things to you. Now, one thing that a lot of people have trouble with in speech introductions is how long they should be. And I have heard speeches that were about 85% introduction and then the rest was speech, and other speeches that were like 0.5% introduction and the rest was speech. Both of those are a bad idea. They say here that there's a rule of thumb that your introduction should be less than 5 to 10% of the entire speech time. Now, if you think about it for a minute, if you're doing a 6-minute speech, that's 3,600 seconds. So 10% of that would be about 360 seconds, right? Actually, I just did the math wrong, didn't I? It's 360 seconds, so it'd be about 36 seconds. You're talking about a half a minute or so. If you speak at normal speaking rate, that's 40 to 50 words, give or take a few. That's a very short little paragraph. I mean, if you were to type it up, it would probably be 2 or 3, 4 lines, something like that. That's not much time, you know, a sentence or 2 or 3 maybe. So they need to be pretty good. And what they suggest, they have a long list of these things, but this is exactly what all of your English teachers told you, and I'm sure you remember everything you learned when you were in your high school and junior high school writing classes, right? And there are obvious things like stating the importance of your topic. That's actually what Ted just did, if you think about it. Make a startling statement of some kind, or arouse the curiosity of your audience. Tell a short story or anecdote. I don't think they're going to do that in 50 words. Ask a rhetorical question, or begin with some famous quotation of some kind. Those are all easy to do. The trick is finding one that fits your topic, obviously. There are several people in here who do that really well. Jack is one of them. On most of his speeches, there's always some sort of one of those things, often a quotation or a rhetorical statement or something like that at the start of it. And those work really well. There's a different kind of introduction that they don't talk about in their little program here, and I'd like to promote this a little bit. And that is the introduction that you write to give to the Toastmaster. If you think about it for a moment, if you follow their rule of thumb, that you should only have 5 to 10% of your speech as introductory material, that's not a lot to do much with. But if you write an introduction that's linked to your speech and give it to the Toastmaster, you can fill a page or so with that. In other words, you can, in effect, gain another 45 seconds or minute of time. Now, if you have a complex speech, and I'll use Jack as an example again, you know, Jack frequently somewhat pushes our time limits. Well, one way he could deal with that would be to write some of it into the introduction he gives to the Toastmaster. That has an advantage too, because then when you stand up to speak, you can say, well, as you know, Jack said in his introduction, such and such, and then launch into your speech. In other words, you let the Toastmaster do your introduction for you, and then you have more time during the actual speech in order to speak. And I'm not sure why they don't mention that in here. Also, having someone else do the introduction for you and then you following along creates a sort of a bandwagon effect, if you see what I mean. It's not just you saying it, it's two people saying it. Well, it must be twice as true if two people are saying it, right? I mean, that's one of the things we learned from advertising. So you really ought to think about that. Most of us don't do a very good job of introductions. We just write a little blurb, you know, like my speech is speech number 3 from the manual, blah, 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 and that's what you get. But there's a golden opportunity there to exploit that and, you know, write it up a little bit in advance. You can actually write that as part of your speech and then just saw off the first part of it and give it to the Toastmaster, figure out a way to do a transition, and then just go from there. Anyway, the point of all of this is that you really should think about the introductions to your speech. The introduction to the speech itself, your part of the introduction, is going to be pretty short. And that varies, obviously. For example, if you're giving an hour-long presentation at a conference or something like that, well, your introduction might be 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes long. But in one of our speeches, it's going to be a lot shorter than that, or you'll run out of time for your real live material. Anyway, something to think about. Give a little bit of thought to that next time you're doing a speech. What's the introduction like? A lot of people will write the introduction last and just be an afterthought, stuck on the front of the speech. Also, it doesn't mention conclusions in here, and there is no educational module about that, but it's a good idea to mirror your introduction in your conclusion. In other words, you're following the time-tested model for composition, which is tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them, and then told them what you just told them. What you're hoping is that somewhere in there, they actually understand you. Mr. President.